So welcome back to Machynlleth 4mm. I hope you're still with me after that quite lengthy video on the scenery in the lower yard. This is the second video in this little series on doing that scenery. So in the last one, if you didn't watch it, I was doing the basic ground cover in the yard with das clay and some texture in it, and I made some coal piles for the coal wharf. I'm going to carry on in this one with the basic ground cover, get some final finishes on that one. So stay tuned. So overnight the das has dried and it's retained a lot of that texture on it. There's some bits and pieces where it's a bit smooth, but as I said, this isn't the final texture. This is just what I wanted, where there wasn't thicker texture that I'm going to put on after we've coloured it all. One little issue that I've noticed with this red das as opposed to the white, there's a lot of sort of staining on the final finish of the edge of the platform and things. Much easier to get off with the white das, usually just with a wet cotton wool bud. I'll give it a try with that, but it might need a bit of repainting, I think, unfortunately. So next I'm going to put a layer of base colour over here, get rid of all this bright red. Going to be using B&Q tester pots. Again, we've got some Stone Age, Sleepy Kitten, Weathered Cottage and Warm Cement. I'm going to put those in, hopefully not disturbing too much of this base texture. Blend it in to give it a more natural look, and then that'll be our base coat, and then we'll put some final texture over the top of that. So first I'm going to go in with this, which is Stone Age, which is a sort of a beigey grey colour. And then do a bit of blending. So there's some Sleepy Kitten. Which is a bit darker. Put this into the corners. Maybe a bit of Warm Cement, which is a bit more yellowy in the tyre tracks. It's a bit heavy, but if we just blend it in like that, we're getting a bit of variation in the colour there. That's exactly what I'm after. So I'll carry on doing that. You don't need to watch me painting all day. So with that drying out now, hopefully you can see that there's a bit of variation to the texture. A bit difficult to tell. I've got bright sunlight behind me. Trying to keep my shadow on it. So the next job is, I didn't take the das all the way up to the edge of the edging stones on the platform, so I'm going to make up a mix of dark grey tile grout. I'll just grout into the edge there so that it looks like well trodden down sort of general dirt. So this is the grout I use. It's a sort of dark grey colour. We'll need a lot of it, I don't think. And we'll just add a tiny bit of water. We can straight trowel that into the gap. So just using a little artist's spatula, just want to fill that gap. Just want to get it off the paving slabs. I'll just do that with a nice soft brush. Just gonna right, so I'll carry on round the layout, round the platform like that. So that's dry now, and hopefully you can see that that's nice and smooth and blended in perfectly to the side of, or to the edge of the coping stones, and also the act of doing that has managed to get rid of all the red staining from the DAS as well. So okay, it's obviously a different colour from the bit that I painted earlier, but we're going to be putting final texture layer on, and we'll be using the same grout mix for doing that, so it will all blend in nicely. So I've been away for about a week. I went to the National Festival of Railway Modelling at the NEC and stayed over in the UK for a few days after that, and you come back and you have a look at what you've done, and some bits of it I'm really happy with, some bits not quite so much. I think looking at the road, although the textures come out beautifully, it's a little bit too beigey for my liking for Tarmac. I think I'm going to have yet another go at that with a darker gloss colour and talc on the top of it to make it a little bit more tarmacy. The entrance to the yard I'm very happy with. It's got that sort of compressed dirt look to it with a bit of texture and a bit of undulation, so very happy with that, and I need to do some sort of finer sort of surface texture around the edges, so happy with that. Platform edges, they come out nicely, just need to, I think, put a bit more grout over the rest of the platform surface, and then I need to have a think about this sort of area here. Oh, sorry, the sun's coming out again, so casting some rather inconvenient bright and shadow areas. Happy with the texture of it, especially, I don't know, you might be able to see with a bit more sun on it. Yeah, with a bit more sun on it you can see the tyre tracks, traction engine tyre tracks in there, so I'm quite happy with that, but again need to put some texture into it. And I think that area I want to be sort of quite muddy, like it's been sort of dug up by, the passage of heavy traction engines and dragging logs around and things like that. So happy with that. So this time I'm using Umbral Gloss number 5, which I think is Admiralty Grey or something like that. So just get a nice coat on here. Seems to go on okay, even though the previous coat has got got a bit of talc in it. And then once that's just started to go a bit tacky, a nice good liberal dose of talc, and then just start to brush it in gently with a nice soft brush. That's got most of it off. I'm going to leave that, and then once that's dry I'll get a hoover with a brush on it and get the rest of it. So my next little job is I'm just going to do the path down the back here. So I want it to be very similar to the platform surface, which I made with this beige tile grout. So we're just going to trowel this on. Right, that's fairly smooth, but that's not my final finish, so I'm not too worried. So again, I've got a nice fine brush, and we're just gonna brush the surface with a little bit of water. And we'll smooth it out like that. So while the surface of that is still wet, I've got a little shaker, and we'll just put some of the dry grout mix in there. With a bit of stocking over the top, and we'll just shake that over the surface. So we'll leave that to dry, and that'll give us a very similar surface to the platform edge. One other thing that I should do is there's a baseboard join here, so just using this because this is actually finer than a knife. Just make a little cut across it there. So I didn't do a shot of the final finish of that path. So here it is with everything in the scene completed. Hopefully you can see that it blends very nicely with the platform surface. So I've blended the surface of the platform where I filled in the edges with filler earlier. I think I'm going to put the coal piles down now, so I'm just going to roughly make a mark around them, because I want the base around those to be nice and black. So I've got myself another B&Q tester pot in black. This is called Downing Street, presumably because of its black front door, number 10. So I'm just going to start putting some black in around this area. Not as black as I wanted that to be, actually. But never mind, because it doesn't have to be the final layer. And then I'll just dry brush the edges out. And now we've got some black weathering powder. This is called Smoke. It's a Hornby one, or sorry, not Hornby, Humbrol. And we can start. So I've now got some Tamiya XF 85 rubber black. That's a much darker, denser black. And now with a bit of water, I'm just going to feather the edges out a bit more, make more of a wash. Now where the edges are a bit stark, we can just blend them in with a tissue like this. So that's dried a bit better. So we've got some weathering powder, and I've got a round brush, so it's not leaving sort of edge of brush marks. I'm just going to start sort of blending this in. You want to try and avoid stuff like this streak here. So there we are, that's looking a lot more blended in. Still not entirely happy with it. Bit of work to do, I think. I think I can now glue the coal piles in place. I'll just do that with a bit of PVA, and then we'll blend those in. So I'll just get a good dollop of PVA on the underside of this. About there. Okay, so now I want to blend these piles in, excuse my phone, blend these piles in with little bits of these coal chippings around the outside of the piles. So we've got our coal chippings, and just going to sprinkle down the sides of these piles. To take the starkness of the edges off them. So start off with some of the finer chippings, and then you can just add bigger ones on top, just to make them look a bit more blended in. There'd have been lots of just random bits of coal lying around in a yard like this. I'm just brushing them into the edges to get rid of the edge of the pile. There we are. And now we need to fix all that lot in place. So in this jar I've got some Mod Podge, about 30-60, with water and a drop of washing up liquid. And in here I've got a very fine spray, these travel spray things that you can get from Boots for when you're going on an aeroplane. Do a lovely nice fine spray, and this is isopropyl alcohol to break the surface tension, so we'll get a good dousing of isopropyl alcohol to start off with. I only work in short distances because the isopropyl alcohol evaporates quite quickly, and then we're just going to give it a good soaking of scenic cement. Start at the top of the mounds and just let it flow down. Capillary action will take it down into the bits at the edge on the platform. And we'll just work our way along there. And we'll leave that to dry. So while we let that coal heap dry, along the side of the weighbridge, there's a piece of rail that comes up as a guard along the side. So I'm just going to bend that into shape out of a spare piece of bullhead rail that I've got left over. That will fit along there. I'll go and spray that and paint it up. So there we are. I'll just get that where I want it to be. Just make a couple of little marks. This is just cardboard under here. So just with a screwdriver, I'll make a little hole. So that fits nicely in place. So we'll just put a little dab of PVA on each end and put that in place. So there are some areas in this that I want to have a bit more texture than this sort of compacted, muddy, gravelly area that I've got now. So I've got some, this is tremendous earth mixture, which is just, you know, finely sieved earth, and this, which is very fine sand that I've collected from a car park near the beach just down the road from me. So just going to apply some Mod Podge. Again, Mod Podge because it dries matte. So we'll have a mixture of heavier beach sand and tremendous soil, which is a lot finer. And I'm going to do some little areas just at the base of these walls. Probably put some static grass on these areas. With a fine brush, just brush it away from where I don't want it. Sometimes if you just sort of pat it, it gets rid of the foam. A lot of gossip at work today. Gets rid of these sort of darker lines on the edge of the glue. sometimes spreads these things out a bit better. Now this can be a bit tricky. You don't want to blow it all away with the spray, so start from a long way away just to start dampening it. A bit going on your buildings doesn't matter. And then we're just going to drip this one on. Just on very carefully. This is why I put the Mod Podge down first, otherwise if you do this it all just washes. All the fine particles down the hill. I didn't have enough. And it should just creep out to the edges of where you want it. Put some more on, helps it spread. And we've got pools of it. Just try and get a bit of tissue paper. Oh goodness. Just to absorb the excess. Try and do that without disturbing. So let that dry overnight, and you can see here I've put a little bit of soil earth coloured weathering powders in as a bit of a test. It's, you know, it's nice, the texture is nice and what I'm achieving. The colour's totally wrong at the moment. Not the final coat. Keep saying not the final coat. Sooner or later I'm sure I'll say that's the final coat and I'm happy with it. So that's the area around the entrance to the yard. I'm going to try and get my shadow off it. And you know, some areas around the weighbridge and the coal hut. These are the coal areas. Again, they look good. A little bit shiny where the scenic cement has bled a bit around the outside. We'll sort that out with some weathering powders. I'm not sure whether that shows up. So the next job I think is to get some ballast down on this track. Now when I say ballast, it's ash ballast. In a yard it wouldn't be proper sort of granite chippings. And it's a two-stage process, so you can see where I've finished the job here. And it's not quite complete. Start off with a layer of the fine sand that I've got in the normal way that you ballast. Put that down, let it dry, and then these grayer areas, that's where I've got some of the grey tile grout. Worked it dry into the you know, the set sand ballast, and then you put scenic glue over that. That creates this sort of ash compressed, sort of ashy sort of finish, which is what I'm aiming to achieve. So this is the sand I've collected. As I said, I've got it from a car park local to me that's by a sandy beach. So this is very fine blown sand that's mixed in with dust. Creates a much finer sort of gritty powder than if you say collected sand straight off a beach, which would probably be larger, this full of bits of shells and quite yellow, whereas this has got a nice sort of brown tinge to it. So simply spread it all around. And then get a fine brush just to brush it off the heads of the sleepers. And then, as you see, there's still quite a lot on the sleepers, so you just tap it with a hard object like a spoon. The sand with the vibrations bounces off the sleeper heads into the areas in between. So that's that pair of sidings done. I haven't put any glue down on it yet. So this side I'm going to do something slightly different. So we've got the coal safe wharf on this side, and the edge of the slate wharf on this side, and I imagine that coal is going to get spilt over the side, and slate, dust and chippings are going to get spilt over the side on this side. So although I'm going to put some sand in, like I've started to do here around the buffers, you can just see here. So on the slate wharf I put edging stones here, and there's just like a ½ centimetre gap where I'm just going to put these slate chippings to suggest the edge of the slate wharf. I've put a bit of masking tape on the side there just to stop it from all falling straight onto the floor. So the next job is a little bit of prep work. In front of the slate wharf, I think there'll be a lot of slate chippings rather than ballast, even if it was, sort of roughly ballast with sort of ash and ash ballast. I think a lot of slate chippings would have fallen into that, and certainly on the top of the wharf, again, slate chipping. So I'm going to make some of those myself, in a method that I used on my last layout that was quite successful, with coloured plaster of Paris painted onto a sheet of baking paper, and then you leave it to dry, scrumple the baking paper up and screw it all up, and you end up with tiny little shards of slate coloured plaster of Paris. So here we are. I've just taped out some baking paper onto my work surface, just normal plaster of Paris that you can get at a craft shop. And I'm going to do two sort of different colours, again using B&Q tester pots. This one's called Slate Roof, this one's called Bottlenose Dolphin, and those are the ones that I use on my slate roofs. going to pour a bit into there. Oop, that's quite a lot. And now I'm just going to add in some plaster of Paris. Start mixing it in. Not worried about mixing the two colours together, it's all going to be a blend of different coloured chippings anyway. A little bit lumpy. If you leave it for a few minutes, those lumps will start to dissolve. Want a nice runny mix that you can paint. You want a nice thin layer. So pour this on. And just got a big nice sort of thin even layer. No matter if they join up, blend it in a little bit so you get some variation in the colour. Right, we'll leave that to dry. Right, so that's all dried off. Now let's see what we're left with. It's a little bit thin. So you just scrunch up paper and it should all just come off. It's coming off a bit more in sheets than I wanted. There we are, we're getting now tiny little slivers of slate. Keep going. Doesn't matter, you want lots of fine bits anyway. I'll just keep scrunching and scrunching that up until it's all the sort of size that I want. There we are. Just give it a quick whiz in my little hand blender. Some bits are maybe a little bit big, but most of it's sort of the size of large 004mm scale ballast. So there we are. Nice realistic size slate chippings and a hair. So these are the slate chippings that I made, very fine. So I'm just going to put a little sprinkle of that in amongst everything. And then the edge of the slate wharf, simply get some of the really fine stuff. So that's the sort of effect that I'm aiming to get on this slate wharf side. So on this side where the coal piles are, just going to quite simply add coal dust into it. It's a fine brush just to mix it in a little bit. Probably get some weathering powders in amongst this once it's all finished. So now I'm going to move on to this area here, which is again the area here where the timber is stored waiting loading with the 6-ton crane here, and I've got my traction engine tracks. Did a bit of experimenting with some weathering powder to see what that looked like. I want this to end up looking like soil, or bare earth, sorry, and I've got this mix which is in fact earth mixed with dark grey tile grout. So I'm just going to start sort of liberally applying PVA to this area. Not too thick when I say liberal, but enough that it doesn't dry out before you even get a chance to put any down. And then got a little shaker here with a bit of stocking over the top of it, so just get a good covering on here. Hopefully it won't obliterate these tyre tracks that I've gone to the trouble of making. So around this grounded coach body, get it where I want it. I wanted more of the ballast effect, so especially the front here. And make sure I get it right up underneath. Just using a fine brush to sort of smooth it out. And I'm going to carry on down this central area and these areas either side of the track, again with the soil, because that's going to be sort of like patchy grass area. And before that has a chance to all blow away, I'm just going to fix it in place with the usual isopropyl alcohol and scenic cement. You spray from a long way away first. It tends not to blow this very fine dust away. So I've carried on all the way up here. I've got some sort of bare earth here, which is going to have patchy grass on the area either side of the lines, and sand as ash ballast on the tracks. It's a nice sort of soft shoulder. You don't want a nice hard shoulder on this. It's a very roughly laid track in a goods yard. It wouldn't have a nice neat shoulder on it, so it's nicely blended into the earth around it. So now need to get that all glued down with the usual IPA, then scenic cement dribbled over it. So just make sure any point blades are moving freely, and then good spray of some IPA. And then just drop little dribbles of scenic cement. This is about a 30-70 mix of matte Mod Podge water with a drop of washing up liquid. If you notice it start to beading, that's because your IPA is evaporated. Right, so I'm going to carry on all the way down there. You don't need to watch me ballasting all day. It's bad enough having to do it without having to watch somebody else doing. So I've let that dry overnight. It's nice and firm now. It's a nice sort of like mixed dark brown ballasty colour. It might be all right for some people to use as a normal ballast, but I'm going to turn that sort of ballasty colour into, like we've got here, which is more of a compact ash colour. And the way I'm going to do that is brush in this, which is a darker grey tile grout. I've just got a tub of it there. So just got another nice fine brush here, and you can see it's left a little bit of staining where the glue has bled into the earth. Don't worry about that, we're going to get rid of that with this effect here. So just pick up some of the grout with the tip of your brush, and then we're just going to liberally brush it into that ballast and the soil around the edge of the track. As you see, that's blending the transition between the ash and the soil in quite nicely. So I'm going to carry on all the way down the yard doing that, and then we'll come back when I've finished. We'll fix it down. So in much the same way as we did the ballasting, soak everything in IPA. And then just a nice good coating of scenic cement. So carry on down there to the end. So this is the sort of entrance area to the yard as it stands. There's a lot of loose tile grout and various textures on there, and the next thing is trying to get it glued down without disturbing it all. So I've noticed on areas where I've oversprayed with the isopropyl that it's actually absorbed into the colours, the powders, and when it's dried it is slightly stuck down, not stuck down enough to be permanent, but I think enough to be able to get some glue on it afterwards without causing too much problems with beading and movement. So I'm just going to give it a gentle spray from a distance just to start getting it to stay in place. I've masked these buildings up because I don't really want to damage their final finish, and they're now glued in place. So we'll just let that dry. It won't take long. Out isopropyl alcohol will dry in 5 minutes or so. Hopefully that'll be enough to keep it in place while we get some glue on top of it. Right, so this is a bit of an experiment. I'm not sure how this is going to work out, but I've actually put some very dilute scenic glue in with some IPA in my spray bottle. So it's probably 50% mix of Mod Podge, water, and actually it's probably only about 20% Mod Podge and then water and IPA. So we'll spray this from afar. We'll see if that's got enough adhesive in it to do the job. So that on the whole has worked very successfully. It's glued that texture down, and hopefully if I can show you, we've got a nice sort of not perfectly flat, sort of somewhat undulating, with some bits with texture in, some bits smoother, looking more compacted. So my only issues really is this sort of area around the coal offices, where we've got a bit of a sort of a bleed line where this sort of heavier earth texture that I put down first. So I'm going to blend that in, and you can do that using the grout powder just as a powder without gluing it down now that it's got a base to sort of adhere to. Just using it like a weathering powder really. So I've got just a little bit of the neat grout and a smaller soft brush, and we just work that into the texture, and it's lightening that up nicely, and it doesn't need to be sort of glued down now. neat. And that sort of transition where the bleed line was is just disappearing. So there we are, that's virtually invisible now. But you do get this sort of change in texture that I was after around the buildings. So similarly up here around the buried track work, just gonna again just lightly blend. Just giving a little bit of variation in colour. So hopefully you can see that the subtle difference that that has made just looks a little bit more, a little bit more blended in the area around the coal offices, the area around the weighbridge. Right, along here there's a little bit of dry stone wall with a pipe coming out of it. So before I put grass on all this area around here, I need to recreate that. I'm going to do that with a little bit of plaster of Paris in a similar way to the way I've made the cliffs at the back. So the drainage pipe, I'm just going to be using a little piece of brass pipe like that, and it comes out about here. So I'm just going to, this is just plaster of Paris with foam board behind it. So I'm just going to make a little hole in the plaster of Paris that I can stick that into. So that will come out there when we're finished. Now I'm just going to put a little light coating, just of PVA glue, just to stop the plaster of Paris when you apply it from coming free. It's quite difficult to stick liquid plaster of Paris to set plaster of Paris. It doesn't adhere very well, so it's just a thin coat, and we'll let that go tacky while I make up a bit of plaster of Paris. So I've made up some plaster of Paris. I made it quite thick, so it's more like a filler than pouring plaster of Paris. You've got to work quite quickly with this stuff. A piece of paper there. You don't want to drop this stuff, bright white stuff, all over that nice texture that we've spent the last week or so trying to create. Right, as it starts to go off, it goes a little bit hard. Before it goes really hard, you need to break bits off it, so it leaves a sort of rough edge. And see, it fractures and leaves a sort of stony effect. So we'll leave that to dry a little bit harder. So the plaster's dried now, so I've just got a pin in a pin vise, and I'm just going to start scribing some rock shapes, irregular rock shapes, into the plaster. a bit difficult to see the actual effect while the plaster's still white. But once we've got it painted up, we'll hopefully have a nice sort of dry stone wally sort of effect. So we'll hoover up all that dust, and then that needs a coat of wash. So I'm sure you probably can't really appreciate any of the stonework in there, so I'm just going to put a wash of sort of dark grey that will hopefully pick up the scribed stones a bit better. It's just about visible. Might need to do a little bit more work on there now. I can see what I'm doing a bit better. So hopefully you can see that a bit better now. I'll put a second scribe on the stones, and we'll give it a second wash. And hopefully you can now see a little bit of stonework coming out in there. And the final little bit is just that little pipe coming out of that hole there. So I'm going to leave it there for now. The next step is I'm going to put the grass onto the embankment, and I want to do that as a separate video because it's quite an interesting technique on its own. It'll hold up its own video. I'm going to be doing that with teddy bear fur, but I will come back after that. I've done that, and we'll put the final details like the gate and some handrails along that path and things like that, so that we feel like we've finished this area off properly.